What comes to mind when we think about January releases in the movie theaters? Well, sometimes it's Oscar buzz movies that have a wider release in January and limited release in December, so we have that to look forward to at least. But for the most part, when it comes to January releases, it's pretty much crap and dumpster heap. We also usually get at least one horror movie in January that's usually pretty bad, or usually one of the worst horror movies of the year. So when we get a horror movie on the first week of January, there is some hesitation. But I had some hope because it's part of the Insidious franchise. It's the newest Insidious movie, Insidious: The Last Key. And I've liked all the other Insidious movies before it, so maybe I'll like this one. But then again, it's a January release date of a horror movie. And it's not being directed by James Wan and not being directed by the writer of all the other Insidious movies who directed the third Chapter 3. It's not being directed by either of those. Instead, being directed by someone else who was one of the writers in the worst Paranormal Activity movie, Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension. I feel that's the worst one in my opinion. And so there's some hesitation, there's some worry, but it's Insidious. It's gotta still be good, right? Fingers crossed. So, Insidious: The Last Key, otherwise known as Insidious Talk, by two people in the movie theater when I went to go see Father Figures. Yeah, that's a little interesting story. I might as well tell a little bit about that, because you're probably wondering, what the hell does Insidious Talk mean? Well, it's TLK. You see, when Insidious The Last Key was coming out, it was coming out on Thursday night at 7 o'clock. It was the last day I could see Father Figures, so I went to go see Father Figures. That screen, however, was gonna eventually become Insidious: The Last Key. And so instead of saying Father Figures right before the screen, it said Insidious TLK. And so two people before me, as I was waiting in the hall, because it was Screen 4, and Screen 4 at Paramount, sometimes the lights are off and it's pitch black, and you have to pretty much wait for the trailers to start rolling so you can actually see your seats. And these two people walk in and they're like, what is Insidious Talk? They said Screen 4, right? We want to see Father Figures, not this Insidious Talk. And so from now on, I'm probably going to call Insidious: The Last Key Insidious Talk. It was just a little funny moment that I had in the theater. Anyway, Insidious Talk. What's it about? Well, it is the newest Insidious movie. Similar to Insidious Chapter 3, it is a prequel. And the events ultimately do lead up to the first movie, the first Insidious film. Similar to Insidious Chapter 3, our main character is Elise, still played by Lynn Shay, who is absolutely amazing in this movie. But she was even better in Insidious Chapter 3, probably. She's still a great actress, though. And now, in this film, we get a little bit more about her past, because the house she's investigating, the house she's trying to appease the spirits or get rid of the spirits, the house that's being haunted, is her childhood home. And things from her past, a demonic presence, some terrible things that her father did, and abuse, start coming back to her and start haunting her throughout this movie, as she figures out what the ghosts want and what is going on with this house. I know that's a vague description, but there's a lot of different twists and turns that I don't really want to get into, because I like this movie. Now, yes, I might be a little biased because I'm a big fan of horror, so horror gets a pass for me sometimes, even some of the more mediocre ones. And I loved all the other Insidious movies, and this one was no exception. First of all, I love Lin Shaye in these movies. Elise is a really great character. Lin Shaye knocks it out of the park just like usual, and she's a top-notch performance that helps you get through the movie if you don't like the story that much. The performance is great. I do like her past that's being drudged up through this movie, that the haunted house she has to investigate is her childhood home, and that her father was abusive due to her psychic abilities. And it also doesn't help that the house used to be right next to a prison that her father worked in, so yeah, that makes sense why it's haunted, doesn't it? Now, it is a horror movie, so how is it on the scare factor? Well, there is a lot of jump scares. There is typical fashion for the Insidious franchise, and some musical cues that happen with the jump scares. But I have to admit that this movie is pretty damn creepy. Now, I am a bit immune to horror films, and I've become... what's the word? I've seen so many horror movies that I've become desensitized to the whole horror aspect, and so it takes a lot to scare me. And usually when I am creeped out about the movie, normally a lot of other people find it scary as hell. I did find it creepy at many moments throughout this film, especially the design of the demon, which is freaking creepy once it gets to the very end, once you see the whole thing. And even though I'm not a big fan of jump scares, I appreciate when it is done right, when it's not false jump scares like a crow or a cat jumping out, or some friend spooking another friend. When it's actually the horror element, and sometimes the suspense before the jump scare is so long and so drawn out and suspenseful, it really is effective. And throughout this movie, there is some really damn effective jump scares that I do have to admire, especially with the build-up and the atmosphere and the suspense. There is some really long, drawn-out suspense moments, and sometimes the jump scare doesn't happen, and you're just like, oh, I guess it wasn't a jump scare. And then another long drawn-out sequence happens, and then boom! And it's actually pretty damn effective. I think the directing was actually really spot on with this movie. With the performances, with the camera work, with the actual drawn-out suspense, atmosphere, and jump scares. I think I have to admire this director for the film. He did a good job. And his name is Adam Robitel? Hope I'm pronouncing that right. He also directed a movie that I haven't seen, but I guess it has some buzz. The Taking of Deborah Logan. I've seen that poster before, I just haven't seen the movie. And I guess I heard it's pretty good. But I can't judge it myself, because I haven't seen it. Now, is this movie littered with cliches that you expect from the genre and you expect from an Insidious franchise? Yes, but there's a few things that I admired about it, and there are a few things that are done differently in this movie. And I like the structure of the movie, of how unconventional it seems. It takes a deliberately slow pacing, but not slow to the point of other slow-paced movies that I love, but slow enough that I feel that the mainstream audience of a horror movie might be a little bored and feel like nothing's happening, because there is a lot of suspense and a lot of atmosphere in this movie, and a lot of moments where it is just the characters exploring a deep, dark house. Dark, creepy house. And there are definitely some twists and turns that I didn't quite expect and thought, wow, that's pretty damn interesting. Especially in the middle with the whole mystery, and you find out a whole nother mystery that might not, or it feels like it's not really leading to the first act and leading to the, or connecting with the first act and leading to the actual confrontation with the demon. But then they find a way to connect it and tie it all in. With that in mind, there are a few things that I didn't like that much about the movie. For one, the humor wasn't all that there. There are some moments that I did find amusing, charming, and funny. One instance is one of her helpers, not the person who wrote the film and who also plays Specs, but the other guy, the big bearded guy. What's his name again? Oh yeah, Tucker's the character. There's this one moment where he is with a boom mic and he's following her around, and they lead to the basement and they find this vent, and there's something in the vent, and so they pull it out, and you see there's there's like a suitcase all the way down the vent, and he's like, step aside, and so you're thinking, oh, he's gonna go in and he's gonna investigate, and then he picks up the flashlight, which they had set down in the vent, so he's like, step aside, picks up the flashlight, here, you're gonna need this. I know it's a little moment and it sounds stupid, but it actually came out to be pretty funny to me, or at least charming. There is a few humor that I do like. The humor that was cringeworthy for me, though, was whenever it was any of these two guys hitting on the younger women. And it's not the fact that, I don't know, it's just creepy and just weird to me, and it just wasn't all that funny. Other than that, I don't mind the characters because I know that's kind of their shtick and that's the kind of characters they are through the movie, and so it makes sense that there are going to be this humorous moments and these funny characters. And they do some things that actually matter to the movie and actually make a difference. There's one of them that does save the day, and I was like, wow, that's a really good sequence, and that was pretty surprising. Though it does make it a little weird that this is before Insidious Chapter 2, right? So this is a prequel before 1 and 2, and then they're bumbling idiots in number 2 and can't defend themselves when they go after the possessed main character. So it does make that, when they can actually handle themselves in this one, but not in number 2 later on, it just, that sounds a little weird. But that's another thing about this movie. There is a few things that don't add up when it comes to the whole franchise as a whole, which is weird because it is the same writer for all 4 of the films, the guy who plays Specs. But I do feel that the addition of this one forcing its way into the franchise does add a few more inconsistencies as the franchise's whole. And I have to say, I ended up having a fun time. I had a blast watching this movie. I like it almost as much as many of the other movies in the franchise. In fact, if I were to choose my favorite, it would definitely be number 1. But I think a close second would be Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, which is the newest one, The Last Key. I would say number 2 might be my least favorite, only because it was a little bit disappointing, but I do love all 4 of the movies. There goes my light. And so ultimately I'm going to give Insidious, The Last Key, 4 stars. I highly enjoyed it. It's a good January horror movie, surprisingly. But then again, I do like all the other Insidious movies, so bear that in mind. Did you see Insidious, The Last Key? What'd you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. If not, what is your favorite Insidious movie if you've seen any of the 4 Insidious movies? Or what's your favorite horror movie in general? And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews. I've got plenty of them, and I already have to catch up in 2018. It's going to be crazy because 5 movies come out this week. That's a lot of movies to see. Anyway, thanks for watching. This is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.